Jonny Holland, what's the story? Congratulations, first of all. How's married life treating you so far?
So I've had that question a few times, and it's no different, really, is it? So no, it's good. It's good. There's definitely, wouldn't say less pressure because that's probably the wrong way to put it, but all the organisation and having to get your ducks in a row, even though Chloe did most of it, but there's things to be paid for, and there's holidays to take and all the rest of it. So as a self-employed person, I think that was tough, but back to normality, yeah.
She's stuck with you now, though. Like, as a self-employed person, like you're locked in, like.
Yeah, I am. To be fair, no, that's the way we want it.
And there'll be no PhD coming soon. We were talking there yesterday about that.
No, I don't think I get through that now. Well, many people have, but it's not for me at the moment. It's definitely not in my mind anyway.
Exactly. As I said to you, like, you have so many things going on, like, at the moment. It would be hard to throw something else on top of that, but you're no better buckle, I suppose. You have enough going on. With Con.
We get through the Masters now first.
Get through the Masters. So the Masters is currently ongoing, is it?
Yeah, I'm just in the middle of my thesis. Well, I say the middle of it. I need to get my act together a small bit, but I did a research project and I have to write it up. So we'll be finished by, like, you have to have it submitted by the 20th of December, and then you have to defend it in January. So it's all underway.
So that was the creatine supplementation for the female athlete. Yeah. So what was your initial kind of hypothesis, and then have you kind of got a chance to gather the data and have a look at it yet?
I've gathered it. I haven't had a proper look at it. Like, I haven't done my stats and stuff, but I suppose I was trying to do it a different way first, in that I wanted to do a kind of a slow loading dose of creatine, because that's more what I believe in practice now. Like, after having a couple of years of implementing that with players, I just don't really, I don't really use the kind of faster loading dose. So yeah, I was going to go a different way about it, but like, getting someone to do something for 28 days and monitoring them and all the rest of it is just it's a large scale project. Like, so we just changed it around a small bit, and we use an acute loading dose to see what the response would be with female athletes and elite inter-county athletes, because I think there's just a gap in the literature with Irish athletes, female, GAA, all of the above, so it's it ticks a couple of boxes, but like, I'd like to have got a bigger sample size and different things like that. But at the end of the day, it's a Masters, like, so you think you're going to get published and change the kind of the practice in the whole sport, like, and then you have to get through it. So it's been a bit of a whirlwind while trying to get ready for a wedding and my sister's wedding and all these things. So like, there was loads going on.
So you basically just said, let's throw all the variables into one study there and see what happens. Like, so make it as complicated as we can. GAA, females, creatine supplementation, like, and you had to do the acute loading, I suppose, because, well, I suppose it
depends on what you're trying to get out of it. Yeah, like, if it depends on what you're monitoring, but we were trying to look at potential weight gain and GI disturbances, and I suppose, like, with kind of daily questionnaires, and we were using we were testing their hydration in the morning time, urine samples, and just a lot of things going on. Like, you're never going to do it across longer than like, it was actually quite enjoyable doing the data collection, and I'm not sure the girls found it too enjoyable, but actually getting stuck into it and doing something real, I think, and something that is actually practical. Like, it's practical and it's applicable to the real world and how we do things in the intercounty setup anyway. So that was quite enjoyable for me, kind of getting stuck into it. But at the end of it, like, it's, you have to actually, the more you do, the more you have to pull together at the end of it, and do all your data and like your stats and things like. So it is difficult now at this stage. I need to get my head around it and finish it.
That's the tough part, is afterwards. Like, I'd say, just getting stuck into the data and having a look at that and saying, and like, you'll change your mind about that a number of times. But what I was going to say is what you said there in terms of practicality, like, probably from you already working in the industry and already being privately employed or self-employed and working as a performance nutritionist, that's probably why you went with the slow loading phase, because it's just so much more practical. Like
yeah, it is. Like, I think it's just, there's a lot of questions and I suppose this research might help in a small way, even though it's gone smaller than I would like it to be. But there's research across other kind of cohorts in Australia and elite sport there. But the question always comes up, whether it's male or female athletes. It's like, I thought that makes you gain weight, and I thought you get bloated from that, and will it cause me to cramp? And it does. And again, like, I don't think athletes even know that much about the stomach upset that might come in a loading dose, but I think it's just not really worth it with all the questions and the lack of buy-in that you can potentially get with it. I just think it's, you're not in a sport that's under a lot of pressure to kind of top up your kind of your muscle creatine or that saturation. Like you're not under that much pressure. Maybe like if someone, it's still a tool you can use. Like if you have someone who's going into competition next week and there's a bit of a placebo involved with the actual effects of that acute dose. But like I just don't see the point when you've got, your weeks out from championship, or your weeks out from a league campaign. Like you can implement it slower and catch up in a couple of weeks. Like, you know.
Yeah, but the other thing that you said there, like everybody just kind of thinks of weight as the one thing. Do you know what I mean? Like it's not in terms of how you're going to use it or an optimum weight. So weight, they think like weight is either bad or good. And like both of us from rugby backgrounds, same deal, especially probably when you were playing more so, it was like more weight. Whereas now like it's all about your optimal weight and what's the optimal weight that you can maintain, and you can move as fast as you can, but you're still not going to be under pressure in terms of a contact situation, which
exactly
for lads like myself and yourself is probably the main problem is the contact situation, and you have enough weight behind you to actually put someone on the floor.
That's it. It's just a more movable object in our situation. But no, that's it. It's just trying to find the balance between being heavy enough to compete in contact, but also the quality of that weight needs to be something that you can use to your advantage, and strength to power or strength to weight ratios and your power and all that. Like it's important that your body composition is within a certain range, but I think we go kind of too far as well in trying to optimize body composition, because what is the optimal body composition? Like it doesn't really, it's not just one size, is it? So some fellas can operate at a lower body fat percentage, and maybe there's something in their environment or in their genetics that allows them to do that, but other people can't get that low but don't need to go that low. And will low body fat put the ball over the bar? Like it's not going to. So
that's exactly what I was going to say. Like it's completely individualized. Like it like whether James Harden is 20% body fat or he's 8% body fat, 3-pointer is still a 3-pointer. Like, so who cares? Like, and like that's the thing as well. Like we do get caught up in the weeds in sports science and in strength conditioning and nutrition like all the time, and we fail to look at the bigger picture. So that sounds like something that you kind of focus on a lot in your nutritional practice, is keeping that bigger picture in mind.
Yeah, I suppose I try to, but like maybe coming through the kind of ranks of a professional sport inside in the academy and stuff like that as well, you learn a lot as well about kind of players' mentality around it, and you'd hear a lot of fellas going, they're giving out to me here about my body composition, but like I'm playing well. And you hear that so much when you are a player, and then you'll know yourself from focusing on body composition, you'll find something that suits you. And my leanest and lightest wasn't my best weight, but my heaviest probably wasn't either. Like, and you'll hear the more experienced athletes kind of talking about it. So I think when you've come through it, you kind of have to take a broader picture. But at the same time, when I was my own athlete, I was probably a lot harder on myself than what I would have been on other people now. Like, because I do see the bigger picture. You have to kind of stand back from it at times. Like, and you go down a rabbit hole and you think something is the most important thing ever to you as a practitioner as well, and then you kind of get a bit of perspective on that too. But I think you do have to stand back, because I think if you're the nutritionist, or if you're just strength conditioning coach, or any one of that kind of multidisciplinary team, and you think you're the most important person and you're the one getting the most out of your game, I think you're lost. Like, so like, where's the mental side coming from it with the psychologist or no psychologist, just the athlete as a person, and then how they eat, how they move, how they take on board some coaching. Like there's so much going on that if you think it's your area that's the most important, then you're not gonna last in that area for very long.
There's only one person is the most important, and that's the athlete.
Absolutely.
Everybody else needs to check their ego and leave it at the door, like because like I suppose we like, it's our profession as well, so we know that we can make a big impact or have a big impact, but like at the same time we probably overestimate the impact that we can make at sometimes. But you still have to do the best job that you possibly can.
And that's what I was going to say, that like you can't take the pride out of your work, because you know that if a fella is leaner or within a certain range of being, whatever that means to them, but within a certain range for their sport, then they're going to be probably fitter, probably more powerful, probably better in contact. Like they'll finish the game stronger, there'll be better fuel going into it, and then that has a knock-on effect on everything. So like I wouldn't underestimate the impact that you can have, but like with these guys at a higher level, you're kind of tweaking things as opposed to changing their whole lifestyle around. Now some fellas you get some great impacts with some guys as well, but they'd want to be operating outside of that range to get bigger impacts. The closer they are to that range, the less of an impact you're going to have on them. But also, dealing with players, you probably deal with their confidence as well, and it's their preparation and confidence that you're kind of optimizing or balancing out, you know,
No,
trying to
that's
get
a
them out of
good
their head.
that's a good word. It is demonized as well. Like optimizing is a vague term, but like it is like that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to have them as confident as possible without being too confident. So that we don't want them
Exactly, like, and
cocky. So it's the same
that's what I
thing. It's
mean.
within a range, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, and that's what I mean by optimizing. Like optimizing might be just settling them down, telling them to stop thinking. You know, that might be more optimal for them. So I don't mean optimal as like the best situation, but the best situation for that person might be just to stop thinking about it and go out and play. Like, you know, and I've definitely been in that situation myself where you're thinking about, should my right foot go in front of my left foot when I'm kicking, and you know, it's kind of like you can overthink it completely, but you lose the kind of flow state too. Like,
You're too busy looking at your feet and the ball's gone wide.
that's it. Like, you know, you're trying to see where you've landed and you're thinking about the wrong things. Like, so I think, yeah, you definitely need to get outside your head at times, and maybe that's just part of allowing the athlete to be prepared so much that they can just focus on the game and what they're doing, as opposed to, you know, are they prepared? Or they might say to you, oh, I didn't feel like I fueled well enough, but like, you'll have enough unless it comes into the last 10 minutes of a tough game. Like, you know, you will get through it. So you see, it's actually very interesting. Like Hell Week was on in the last couple of weeks, and they weren't fueled, but you know, you see some guys, Peter Stringer, running the 21-kilometer hike. Like, you know, you find it somewhere. So I think that there's learning and all those things. Like,
They don't have to recover those. They don't have to do it again next week. Yeah. So that's what I would be worried about. But I was just going to say, I was going to say that the problem is, well, not even that it's a problem, but a lot of athletes speak in absolutes, but it's not just athletes. Like it's the whole country. It's either always or never. And the same thing is, if we bring it back to your kick, like if my right foot lands in front of my left foot, then the ball always goes over the bar. No fucking doesn't. Because that's life.
Like, we're dealing with extremes all the time. Like, and you're either low carb or high carb, or you're, you know, fat's the devil or carbs are the devil. And you are dealing in extremes all the time. Someone is all in now, or they're not in at all because it's Christmas time, or you know what I mean. Like, but there has to be some form of balance. Like, and the more balanced you are, the more consistent you'll be over time, and you don't really have to deal with these extremes anymore. Of like, I'm going to turn my life around for 4 weeks and then I'm going to enjoy myself for 4 weeks. Like, it just doesn't really work like that, you know.
Yeah, why don't you do both as best that you can at the same time, like, essentially, like, but it's a tough one to get through, because as you said, like, it's always not enough. So it's, I wasn't fueled enough. Well, what is enough? Like, do you know what I mean? There becomes a tipping point as well. Like, and that's what I've heard you talking about in terms of your pre-match nutrition and like athletes carb loading. A lot of the time they overdo it more so than, well, not more so than underdo it, but probably in equal amounts overdo it as much as underdo it. And you don't want to be going into a game with an upset stomach or feeling heavy, I suppose is the term that you've used before.
Yeah, I think that's the term that I kind of, it was just echoed back at me a lot when I started in the GAA. It was a funny one that I hadn't really heard it so much in rugby circles, because they want to be heavy, like, you know. But they were like saying, I feel heavy, but it wasn't a heaviness that I just kind of translated
sluggish,
it to,
I suppose.
Yeah, but a fullness and a lack of digestion and just that kind of bloatedness from eating a lot in the day of, like, you know. And that's something that I've definitely changed my opinion of. Like, you know, I thought that you still had to have a decent pre-match meal and you have to still have a good bit of food on that day, but like, I think you can relax and be comfortable because you know what you've done in the last couple of days is going to be enough to get you through, or not even get you through, but be quite good, you know. So I think that's the kind of relationship with the person that you're dealing with, or their understanding of what's going on as well. Like, the less you want to eat on that match day, you know, don't eat nothing, obviously, and you do still have to get some food in, but and then the less you get in, maybe the more you have to think about what it is that you're getting in, and the simplicity of those carbohydrates and how you digest them and all that kind of stuff. But like, some people just don't like to eat on match day, and if they want to keep it light for most meals, then maybe they just go a full 2 days beforehand with increasing their carbs. And other fellas who like to eat and feel full on a match day, like I would have been hungry in a game if I didn't eat properly before it. So like, that hunger distracts me in day-to-day life, never mind in a match. So it's something where I would have had a full meal anyway. So do I need to? And as an athlete that was trying to gain weight all the time, did I need to start carb loading on top of that? Like, definitely not, you know. And I never really carb loaded a massive amount anyway, because I was always putting weight on. So I was always up at, like, you know, 6-7 grams of carbs per kilo of body weight, and I was always quite high. Like, so I don't think I was ever walking around depleted of carbs.
We're just missing the forest for the trees, I suppose. Well, athletes maybe, because they're like, oh, what am I doing on match day? And it's like, well, what the fuck have you been doing for the last 14 days? Never mind match day.
You see with, like, maybe club athletes at their, you know, championship now, so what you eat before it, and it's like, you should have actually practiced this at some stage, and you know, there's more to the week or the last couple of days in just the championship morning, like, you know. So yeah, you're dead right. You do deal with kind of absolutes, like you said, and you miss the forest for the trees because you just think that any one moment is more important than a couple of moments collectively, like, you know.
But like at the same time, we've just touched on it there. There's like a high degree of individuality when it comes down to these nutritional practices, because it's not a one size fits all. As you said there, some lads will want to eat on the match day, some lads won't. So I just wanted to ask you, without naming names now, can you give us a couple of the very common problems that you've had to deal with your athletes in the recent months, I suppose, and then how much of that process has been individualized, or how much of it just comes down to cleaning up kind of general habits?
Yeah, I think the collective should sort out something for most people, because you'd hope to have kind of explained it in a way that you should touch on everyone, but like they maybe don't take it on board at the time, or they don't really understand it, or maybe don't know how to apply it. But at the same time, you know, they kind of know what's best for themselves as well. Like fellas would say to you, I just don't tolerate a gel very well, or I don't tolerate the sports drink very well. And that's probably one of them that, you know, coming off the back of the GAA season, like you're going through a lot of matches and stuff, that you can't have one carbohydrate source in the dressing room. You have to have multiple and different forms and different tastes. And, you know, it's not going to be, like you said, one size fits all, but it's the same understanding that you're getting a carbohydrate source in. So like that now, it's kind of playing around with one or two of the footballers like that didn't take gels because they just didn't suit them. And it's kind of like the osmolality of that, where it's a sticky paste as opposed to a drink that you can digest a little bit easier. So, you know, going through things like, can you take the gel on board with some water or with some fluid, and then it changes how you digest it, and it's a little bit different in your stomach. Or you know, when fellas get really kind of bad cramping or stomach issues, and maybe they're dehydrated with the carbs going in too. So then, like, you're kind of thinking, can I get this fella a sports drink instead, or does he need to eat some food, or does he just need to hydrate and make sure that he's carb loaded beforehand quite well, you know? So there's a couple of things like that going on. And then I think in the last year as well, you've fellas kind of really focusing on their own body composition and getting stronger and or leaner, and what they've done in the off season has been kind of quite interesting. You know, some fellas have turned into senior athletes, like coming from just getting out of under 20s or something, and maybe just hadn't had the chance to work on their strength and their size and how they move, you know. So I think there was a massive opportunity there. I'm not so sure about many problems, to be honest. Like, I think you know, a lot of fellow, we probably had a lot of time to work on things, and especially with my own continuity within the squads in the last couple of years, like, I don't think there was any major issues. But again, it's just still trying to get to know the individual. And when we say, like, I think sometimes when you say, oh, I deal with someone on an individual basis, people think that you're running like a blood profile on every single one of them and changing their diet, and that they've got different kind of, and you see all these nonsense things about eating for your blood type, and it just doesn't exist, like, you know. So what you're really talking about is just spending more time asking questions and trying to understand the person until you figure it out, like, you know. And that might take a lot longer with some people, and it might be quite short with others because they've got less issues or they speak to you more. So like you kind of learn it a lot faster, and other fellas are kind of slow burners where you have to kind of unravel it a small bit, like, you know. So the individual thing, it comes across as a bit kind of you know, daunting to fresh practitioners. Yeah, it's not as daunting or as complex as what you think it is. Now, maybe other people, you know, you see like individual athletes going to the Olympics or boxers and stuff like that. It's obviously an individual sport. You can really drill into it. But from a team perspective, when I say individual, like, you're really only trying to know the person as much as you can before making decisions, because they'll all react a little bit differently. Like,
first off, I should have said work-ons rather than problems, because we never have problems. We just have work-ons.
Yeah.
But what you said there in terms of the individualization as well, like, I'd agree with what you said completely. Like, from seeing nutritionists work before, like, a lot of it comes down to the individual's lifestyle. It's not so much like the foods that they're eating, even though you're still going to be focused on what macros they're getting in and if they're getting the right micronutrients as well. But you can't treat someone the exact same that's up at 5 a.m. every morning for work as a teacher that's up at 10 to 9. Sorry to the teachers.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So it's like timing of when you're ingesting your food. Like, do you prefer to eat before training, or are you going to bed straight after training pretty much, or trying to? So are you going to be able to take on a huge meal after training? And that can be a problem for GAA athletes, especially because if they're working long hours throughout the day, they haven't had time. Well, we all have time, I suppose, but they say that they don't have time to ingest enough food. So then when you're eating before sleep, it can be a problem.
Yeah, like when I came into the GAA, I was like, and you know, I was probably harsh on, I wasn't harsh on people because I never actually said it to anyone, but I probably had learned just before that by starting to coach with Con that these fellas were out at work all day. And in fairness, with Con, we're very local. You know, there's a couple of lads that travel a little bit more distance on training nights and stuff like that. But for the most part, fellas are local. But when you're dealing with an inter-county team, especially in a county like Cork, that's kind of widespread, you are getting fellas who are traveling an hour and like an hour and a bit maybe, like, and then you know, they're getting to training early for physio, and also maybe there's no time to go home between that and work, you know, so they just have to go there early anyway and try and get bits and pieces done. And then if they were home afterwards as well. So like, I think it was the big thing that put manners on me in terms of my empathy and how I deal with people is that, you know, you do realize that some of them are up at 5:30, 6 o'clock going to a physical job like tradespeople, you know, not just sitting in an office either. And then they're having to go up the road at 4:30 or 5 o'clock to get to training, to get their physio done, to be prepared. And then when they're leaving, it's 8:30, 9 o'clock, and they're not getting home till 10 o'clock. Like, you're telling them to prep their food and treat them the same as a person who lives in Douglas from Parky Queeve. Like, you know, it's very, very different. So I think that definitely put a bit of manners, or not really manners, on me, but I think it was a realization moment that, you know, this whole thing where I would have been like, you do have time for it, get up off the couch and stop watching TV, and get up in the morning time, stop sleeping too much. Even though I don't think people sleep too much, you just stay up too late. But like, at the same time, I kind of went, all right, stop being such a hard ass. Like, people actually have things going on, you know. So in the GAA, particularly in the inter-county setup, like, I think that I don't really give too many people the excuse of time, but I let them away with one or two things because of time, because they've got very little of it and a lot of pressure on them as well.
Don't worry, I know what you mean by put manners on you, being from the same area of the world. This is for anybody that's up here in the Pale now, or that isn't from the southern province, I suppose. What Jonny has just articulated what he means by put manners on you, but it means just check yourself, essentially, like, and realize that you can't be so black and white in your thinking, and just relax it a little bit more. In terms of then, like, individualization as well, like, we've touched there on in-game nutrition, and it might sound ridiculous, but you've already said it there. The individualization in terms of in-game nutrition might be just like, do you want an orange slice, or do you want a Jaffa cake, or do you want a gel? Like, and that's what we've just said. And not, like, from my experience anyway, there's only a handful of athletes on the team that I'm working with that can tolerate the gels, and generally the ones that tolerate them are the ones that have taken it in the past. And I've ran into problems before in terms of athletes are now with the water breaks, coming to that final water break, and they're struggling a little bit, and they're like, give me a gel. And I'm like, whoa, have you taken one before? And I had one instance where a fella hadn't, and I told him to take half of it, and he took the whole thing because I don't know, he just didn't want to listen to me. And then he had to come off, and he came off and he ran straight into the jacks. So, so that does happen. Like, and it's about finding a balance and finding out what works for everyone. And what works for one person isn't going to work for everyone. So you have to have a number of different types of jellies as well, don't you?
Yeah. But like, just the message of practicing it beforehand, like, you know, that you might have been like, right, I'll take a sports drink on board instead, which probably should have happened anyway. Like, I mean, when you look at the inter-county setup in the last 2 years, like, it's interesting watching it on TV. And as a nutritionist, you're trying to catch the table of the other nutritionists, kind of going, what are they doing that we're not doing, or is there anything different? But like, it's not any different. Like, you'll see people are kind of going, what are Dublin doing, or what are Limerick doing? And of course they're doing something in behind the scenes, and they're getting there's reasons why they're performing so consistently. But like, is it the type of jelly that's on their table? There's not jellies on the table anyway. Like, so you talk about, you know, when you need a carbohydrate source in these types of exercise, like, and people always kind of say, oh, you only need something if it's more than an hour, and you know, GAA is 70 minutes, but you've also got a warm up, and you've also got the intensity that you're playing at. So yeah, be carb loaded and get something on at half time. But like, you know, you're expecting to see something on the table where, you know, there's food there, and fellas will, even the kitmen will say to me, like, should I bring the gels out for the second water break? And it's like, you really, like, you're only doing it because players might be looking for it, but they probably shouldn't be looking at it if they kind of understood it a small bit, you know. So it's like, yeah, we really don't need them, but they're probably left over from half time, so bring them out there if you want. And if a fella is struggling, particularly in that game because he's coming back from injury, or he's just a bit unsure of his kind of loading process, then fair enough. But like, you probably shouldn't need a whole lot more than water on those water breaks, you know.
But what, like, that's it as well, though. It's a lot of it is a placebo effect upstairs, like, and they're thinking like, oh, I'd have to ingest something and then I'll be flying it. Like, and is me giving someone like Roundtree's fruit pastel going to be the difference between them putting it over the bar, not putting it over there? Probably not, like, but it makes a difference to their head, and it's all about confidence, as we said. But they underestimate even the value, I'd say, of the sports drinks, or even a mouth rinse of some carbohydrate or something like that. And like, it's the same thing from a strength conditioning perspective as well. Like, you're constantly looking at other teams, and it goes on everywhere. It's like, what are they doing differently to us in the gym? And like, what are Limerick doing? What are Limerick doing in the gym now that they're so good? No, they're better at hurling. Like, they're putting the ball over the bar more times and they're winning. And a lot of the time, the difference is an intangible. Like, it's not a strength and conditioning difference. It's not a nutrition difference. Those are the small margins that we have to try and improve all the time. But there's no like magic formula. Nobody's running away with a magic formula, you know?
No, and that's like where they think like, you know, let's see their Bronco scores, or let's see what their scores are like in the gym. And I think, you know, you put your strongest athlete against their strongest athlete. I don't think there's any difference in them, or your fittest against your fittest. Maybe consistently across the board, they're all a bit more developed, or, you know, something like that. But I don't think you're going to, and maybe like it's more of a how they move and just a bit more exposure over time, you know, these kind of things. But like, if you're looking at like 1 versus 1, like, you're not really going to get the answer in that, because it's not massively different. And like you said there, it's environmental, it's intangible, it's coaching, it's all of those things pulled together. Like, it's not just, oh, they're stronger than us or they're fitter than us. Often when people think that the other team are fitter than them, they just play the better tactics and they've run you around the place and you're chasing shadows. Like, so is it fitness, or is it the amount of load that they've exerted on you while controlling the game? Like, you know, so it's probably a frustrating one from a sports and or a strength and conditioning point of view, that, you know, you lose a game and all of a sudden you weren't fit or strong enough, but you win a game and no one bats an eyelid, like, you know.
Yeah. And it's small margins as well. And often, like, the team that, oh, they're a lot fitter than us, well, they actually didn't run as much because they were in the position quicker and they were in the right position for the ball to break for them. What can we do to improve that? Probably not run you into the ground. Don't get me started on Bronco tests now. But if we could get you a little bit faster, a little bit more agile, a little bit more better at perceiving where the ball is going to break, then you're more than likely going to be there. So let's focus on the bigger picture here and focus on the sport. So we've moved.
Sorry, last one is like, even with Con, like, there's been a couple of times, and we don't really talk about that, but like, there's been a few times where there's a decision at the end of the game. Like, I know one game a few years back, there was a scrum penalty that could have gone either way, and we got it and we kicked it over the bar and we won our first game of the season. And like, it kind of allowed us to drive on a small bit and win the next one and build a bit of momentum. But like, it's a referee's whistle that decided the game, like, you know. So, and the fella had to kick it and the fellas had to scrummage, so don't get me wrong, but like, you know, you'll see the reaction in the papers or the media from like games that are on TV, and the penalty goes against them, they weren't fit enough or good enough, but the penalty goes for them and just paper over the cracks, and there was nothing wrong with them at the time, like, you know. So it is split second stuff that wins or loses the games, like, not the out and out conditioning, and it has to be an issue.
It's a factor. It's a factor, but everything's a factor, and it's not one thing. Now we will get into Con in a minute, but what I wanted to touch on before we get into that is we've done pre-match nutrition, we've done in-game nutrition, then from a post-match kind of nutrition and a perspective there. My perspective as an S&C is the second they step off of the pitch, they're now recovering for the next game or for the next session. So how have you kind of facilitated that recovery as best as you can, while still kind of being conscious that post-game it's not going to be the most important thing, as we said, like, and even if an athlete is coming off, like, the game isn't over, like, so I can't be jumping down their throat trying to throw carbohydrates at them or throw drinks at them and throw food at them. And I've done it myself, like throwing bananas at them.
I've done it as well, and that's what I was going to say, that like, there's massive learnings in that like, you're the nutritionist, so get them their milk, like. And I at the start was probably a bit more insecure, not insecure, but like, just kind of trying to do things, like, you know. And I was just meeting them coming off the pitch with their milk, and they're kind of looking at you stupid, like. And some fellas will take it and they kind of know the importance of getting something on board, but, you know, what's the difference between the fella that exerts himself for 55 minutes and comes off? The fella who's on for 70 minutes doing more can't get that milk. So is he going to be less recovered? Of course he's got more load, like, but is the split second going to matter, or can they both get it after 70 minutes, like, you know? So I think some of those things have definitely gone more into my mind as I was more experienced with it, and not to kind of put fellas under pressure, particularly when you're losing. You'd see that there's more milk left over. When you're winning,
manners have been put on you, basically.
Absolutely, yeah. I've had to put them on myself, because like that, like, of course you need to get some, like, you talk about a training session and you want to eat within a certain amount of time afterwards, whatever that might be, like depending on what they've eaten beforehand, and you do want to get something within the hour, like, or maybe a bit earlier depending on how hard it was. But like at the same time, you know, they haven't eaten in a long time after the games or before the game. So like you do want to get something into them when they can tolerate it. But like that interaction between the mental and the physical and the nutrition and annoying them and pissing them off, frustrating them on the bench when they're already frustrated for coming off, unless they've just had a really good effort and delighted to come off because they know that they've emptied themselves, you know. So like, yeah, I've had some looks and I've had some don't want it and throw it away, take it and throw it in beside them kind of thing. Like, and you kind of realize that, you know, we can wait until the dressing room afterwards. But like that's only one situation where, you know, you need to have something in the dressing room, because very often you won't get that meal for another 1 to 2 hours unless you're above in Croke Park or unless you're eating on site, which doesn't actually happen as much as you think in the GAA. Like you go off back to your hotel or you go back to a club that you've set up in the pandemic and stuff, where you might get a takeaway. You might get a takeaway in the ground, but they're not going to open that and eat it with a plastic fork and knife right there, like, you know. So that's where the dressing room does become important. Like, funny enough, people think about gels beforehand, they never think about them afterwards, and I don't either. But if there's a gel left over, there's no harm in taking that. Or but I don't do that. Like, we more than likely drink a sports drink, finish off the jellies, finish off the Jaffa cakes, whatever's in the dressing room. They'll keep picking away once there's things there. So like that, now you need to just facilitate the fact that there needs to be a box of fruit, different bits and pieces, sports drinks, plenty of fluid, have a protein milks there or whatever type of milk you're using, and or unless they're using their own protein shakes and bringing them with them, but they won't bring them, I bet you. Not too many fellas will be organised that way when they're thinking about the game. So yeah, you're just making sure that there are things available, a combination of carbs and protein within the dressing room and fluids, and then like those 3 hours of recovery, isn't it? The repair, refuel, rehydrate, protein, carbs, and fluid. So making sure that those things are there for that kind of hour, and then you'll move on to your meal afterwards, which obviously is their bigger top up. Like,
so I know there we've talked about individualization a lot, and it's not one size fits all, but those 3 hours, would they be your non-negotiables, do you reckon, if you were to say you had any non-negotiables?
Yeah, I think so. Like, you have to, there are certain guidelines you can't get away from, like, you know, or like you said, non-negotiables, it's still going to matter. Like, you do need to get protein and carbs in after a game. You do need to rehydrate soon after that game. So like they are non-negotiables, but like when you say individual, fellas are different weights. Like, so it's the same 27-gram bottle of protein milk going to do the heaviest and the lightest? No, there's a difference. Some fellas take 2 milks because other fellas don't take any. So like, you're not going to be going around saying, you know, lads, it's a gram of carbohydrates per kilo of body weight now, so you need an apple and 2 Nutrigrains, whereas you don't, you know. So like, you're not.
Johnny, we're after losing by 3 points. You fuck off.
Yeah, and that's it. Unless you're going to have the packs there ready for them, I just don't think it's realistic, or it's not going to make the biggest difference in the world anyway, because they'll all go to the post-match meal and eat to their appetite regardless, you know. So, and that's another thing that comes into it, is appetite. You know, some fellas won't touch it for a while, and other fellas are ravenous coming off the pitch. Like, so that's the individual thing, knowing who's going to take it from you, knowing who's going to have more in the meal afterwards. And at the end of the day, like you said, you're splitting hairs with the amounts and the absolute values.
Do you think it was easier for you to have that empathy and have that connection and understand what the players were going through, given your experience in professional sport and what you went through yourself?
Yeah, I think so. I think it has to stand for something, you know. So like, it didn't stop me from charging at them with an having more milk at the start. Like, but I think you realize the reaction, and you're kind of going, right, I know why they're pissed off, and I know. And you put the arm around them, and you say, after an hour, I know you've not had anything, so maybe let's just get into it, like, you know. But I think, yeah,
with a bottle, is it?
What's that?
With a baby's bottle.
Yeah. Feed. So I think, like, you do understand the situation. You probably understand the dressing room a little bit more. You don't overstep. You kind of just learn to blend into the background, because you know what it's like when someone else doesn't do that, you know. And when someone does that in your dressing room as well, you tend to see it very easily, because you know, when you've been in the dressing room, it does catch your eye sometimes, going, what are they doing, like, you know. So I think definitely trying to blend in. I've been in plenty of dressing rooms as well, where you're kind of feeling like, you know, there's tactics going on here, like I shouldn't be here really, but you do still want to try and be the fly on the wall, as small as you can. A
presence. You're available to them then, I suppose. Like, do you know, if they do need to come up to you?
Yeah, they will still ask you, like, do I take my caffeine gum right now, or will I take it in 30 seconds time? Like, you know, so they will still ask you small stuff like that. So that's like what we said, the confidence. It doesn't matter whether to take it now or 2 minutes time. They obviously need to be within a certain time to, like, you know, the absorption of caffeine, depending on the kind of way you take it, like whether it's gum or gel or whatever, it's going to take some time. So like, obviously those things are guidelines, but whether they take it when they ask you or whether you're not there at all and they wouldn't have asked you, they're well able when you're not there. So like I think it's again, trying not to split hairs, but being there to kind of address the confidence and letting them know that now is a good time to take it, and they just move on to the next thing. But like the kind of fly on the wall thing is just kind of seeing, that fella's not really taking on much carbohydrate, or he's cramped in the game, and I knew at half time I didn't really see him up to much, so it's just small things like that might give you the edge when you're dealing with them afterwards. But in terms of having been in dressing rooms, I think it's also important for my confidence, the things that I'm doing, and at different times, like coaches or players or someone might say to you, we don't need you here, or do you want to be in here? And it's like sometimes at that stage you're kind of going, I'm not really needed, or I know you don't really want me there, but I'd like to have a look over your shoulder. I'd like at some stage to get into that dressing room just to see what's going on, but I don't need to be there every time. So let me know when it's a good time to get in there. These kind of things, it just allows you to have the confidence of backing yourself as well at times.
It's something from actually working and actually doing a job that you realize is best practice is best practice. It's not the only practice. Do you know what I mean? Like, and some things just aren't practical, so you can't do them that way. So that doesn't mean that they're not valuable though. But it just means that you can't, you're not going to be able to do it the exact same way that was done in a research study, which you know all about anyway.
Exactly. And it's like what's happening in the book and what's happening in your environment. Like what's the manager like? What are the coaches like? What's your actual group like as well? Do they place value on this, or are you just going to piss them off? So it's maybe trying to get that education in somewhere else and letting them know that it is important, but at this time you don't need to fight that battle, So it's just, like you said, it's, what does the textbook say? How does that translate? And in your environment, is that possible, or what's the priority? And if at that time it's not the priority, then just get out of the way. Like,
I know you've said yourself that you would have been partial to going online during your playing career and having a look and a gander at a few research studies and then wrecking nutritionists' head the odd time. But is there anything that, now that we've talked about like practicality and that, is there anything that you look back on that you did in your own career that you'd be like, oh Jesus, what was I at there?
Loads. Yeah. There's plenty of it. Like, I mean, I got really into the nitty gritty of some things that didn't actually matter. Like we said a while ago about, eating generally well and carving up and stuff. And then you're talking about micronutrients and thinking that you're the most important person in the room. I don't think I'm the most important person in the room, but as a player, I focused on nutrition a lot, and probably way too much, to the point where when I was injured, I was buying loads of pineapples to get certain ingredients in there, and I was, berries into smoothies, and all good habits, but I just placed way too much importance on them, and it probably dictated how I ate. And then things like having a load of sweet potato because I just thought it was better than potato. That
was a phase though. That was a phase back then. Everybody thought that at the time.
It was but I did it twice a day, every day, with buckets of it, because I would have to eat a lot as well. So I just thought this was the best way to get more in. And even I was doing an Instagram live kind of turned podcast thing on Monday, and one of the lads commented on it, asking about the sweet potato, because it's always going to come up. Fellas, when I was injured, I was sitting in the gym eating my own lunch when fellas would go for lunch, and I put way too much importance. Now I think at the same time it gave me some form of an edge, and I was doing a lot of very good things, but at the same time I was reading and asking the nutritionist or dietitian at the time, and she'd be like, oh, how do I explain this now without kind of taking the wind out of his sails, but also tell him to stop talking nonsense, so there was a balance in terms of my education too, without kind of beating me down in terms of what I was learning as well. But that's why I actually got into nutrition. I remember saying to Catherine that I'm sick of kind of reading contradictory stuff and I don't know who to believe and all that kind of thing. So that's why I kind of got into the more formal education of nutrition, and that probably drove me on a bit, because there's only so much that Catherine could teach me with my one-off questions, or running into her office in the middle of gym sets, and just kind of saying, yeast-free bread, good or bad, or sweet potato or potato, which is better? And
good or bad, black and white.
Yeah, exactly. And she's kind of on the spot going, well, they're both good for you, or what's the context when you're having it, how much you're having it? I'm going, sorry, I need to jump back in and squat there. It's just not the right way to learn. So in fairness, she put me on the right track, and I went and got more educated, and luckily I didn't do too many things that I would be madly embarrassed about, because I thought it was the right thing at the time, and everything moves on. But I think as a practitioner, you're going to do things now that you don't believe in either in 5 years' time, or more research comes out and you realize you were the one talking about that, So I think if you're not learning, you'll never be embarrassed with the things you've done, because you've never really moved on.
Sounds like her communication style and her openness had a big impact on you. And then I'd assume you were looking for black and white answers all the time, and then you became a nutritionist and you started reading research studies, research papers, and you were like, hold on a second, like there's no black and white in any of this. It's all kind of, you have to make up your own mind or what suits the individual, as we've already touched on. But that communication style that she used, is that something that you're conscious of now, like when you're working with players?
Hugely. I think it really impacted my career that I didn't have yet, but it impacted how I learned, and it impacted how I communicated with people, definitely, because I probably learned it's like the education of life in a sense, like that you kind of learn through practice. And I think being kind of empathetic in that and kind of giving people some bits. I know she told me things were fine at the time when she was kind of giving me something, like, and I was looking back now, I'm like, oh, I was still stupid, but like she couldn't just cut me down completely. Like, so once it wasn't doing any harm, she was allowing me to play around with one or two things, but definitely to be then to tell me I was wrong and other things, like, so it's definitely how I deal with people. Because of that, I think there was a big shift in how we were educated as athletes when Catherine came in, and that's something that I would have noticed being into my nutrition and stuff. I just would have noticed that straight away. She wasn't washing her shakers and filling her shakers, and she wasn't doing some of the stuff that is just babying us, like, so there was definitely a case of being adults but being educated too and allowed to make our own decisions. So that's something that I would try to get across to players, that you might be explaining a little bit too much to them sometimes, but I think when the penny drops, they'll be able to deal with that when they go back to their clubs, or when they don't have you as a nutritionist, or when they're maybe out of the scene or in their own lifestyle at home the other couple of hours where they're not training, like, so I think the education piece to me is massively important, as opposed to just telling them what to do and when.
Absolutely, like, and it's kind of what we were going to talk about. It's more of a collaborative kind of approach to their learning, rather than an authoritative, this is the way it is and you just need to learn it, which is the way it'll even start, which I think probably permeates the culture in Ireland more so than anything else. But before we move on from talking about nutrition and the injured athlete, like, then from your communications with injured athletes, what would be the common work-ons that you see with those injured athletes, in like in a general kind of consensus, or like what are the main problems that we see, to use the word problems again, with the injured athletes, and what are the mistakes that they make a lot of the time, would you say?
Well, I think we can make mistakes too, in that, like, you go to the athlete, you want to get stuck in, you want to get your teeth into him, like, oh, he did a knee ligament in the match at the weekend, let's text him now and say this is what we need to do. His head is so far from that, or her head is so far from that you have to be very careful about who the person is, again, because some people just beat themselves up about why they got injured. They might have had 2 or 3 before that, and you have to realize that they're not thinking about their food. Like, I don't want them obviously to go away and have a load of pints at that time, but if that's what they need at the time, because they've had a couple and they're out for a long time, I can't dictate that. So I think I need to be very careful about who it is, what their situation is, how many injuries they've been through, is it fresh to them, do they understand anything to do with it? Because a lot of the time you see fellas go, well, I'm injured now, so I'm going to have a blowout, or I'm injured now, so I'm going to eat what I want. And it's actually the opposite. You've less leeway with what you're doing. When your body is obviously going through a trauma of some degree, whether it's big or small. It's a continuation of recovery from training and matches anyway. So that's why I think there's a nice little kind of link to it, because like training and playing and stuff, it breaks down your body to a degree, and you have to recover that as well. So then the injury is just like that, but in a targeted site. So like a lot of the things are going to be similar messages to what they're used to. But you see fellas don't probably understand that, like, some non-negotiable things that, depending on the person, they might not want to lose weight, or they might want to lose weight, and it dictates how they eat in that next kind of couple of months period. So you have to try to, I see all these things about weight maintenance is a very good place to be for an optimal, or a kind of a nice recovery kind of environment. So you want to have that to a degree, but then some guys might be doing a lot of upper body, so their weight might go up a small, but then you have to kind of allow that to happen and facilitate that, while also managing overall body fat levels. But you might also know that this guy is a guy that could lose body fat quite quickly, and when they start running, it falls off them anyway. So like, but do they want to start running with maybe a knee injury or something like that, where they're overloading their upper body and having a little bit less stability or load going through that knee? So there's loads going on. But I think the messages to them are quite simple. Let's monitor your weight, keep it fairly balanced and normal, and don't be going up and down. Have a protein source 4 or 5 times a day, 25 grams, 30 grams, whatever it is, depending on their body weight. Obviously a nutritionally diverse and nutrient dense diet, different colors, hitting your fruit and veg, having some fish if you like it, high fiber carbs. You're probably not having the cereal bars or the kind of sugary stuff as much anymore. You're not drinking sports drinks because you don't need them. So just kind of very basic practical things like that. But like when I was injured, I was, what spices am I having, and where am I getting my omega-3s from every day, and like it just, you get into these kind of rabbit holes, like as opposed to just thinking basics everyday, protein source,
protein maintenance, calories.
Yeah, yourself, like you can't go too far away from that. And then when you're dealing with the athlete who's less experienced as well, like that's the only place you need to go. And do they even know what calories are anyway? So like trying to figure out what they do in a day to day and what they need to kind of pull back slightly on, or what they don't need to pull back on, because with their injury they're going to have a lot of recovery and an increase of kind of metabolic rate and all that kind of stuff. So like again, it sounds complicated, but it's not. It's the basic stuff that we're dealing with anyway in post training or post match recovery.
Yeah, you don't want them in a deficit. You don't want them in a surplus of too much anyway. Like especially like I see young lads when they get injured now, they're just, if it's a lower limb injury, they're like, right, I'm just going to get massive now, just to show off. Like, and then I'm like, well, okay, we can probably put on a little bit of muscle mass, but realistically, if we put on 5 kilos here and you come back, is your hamstring going through the same load that it was previously? No. So we probably need to get it stronger than it was previously. So maybe we just, like, we can always improve. We can improve your strength, but maybe let's not focus on putting on 5 kilos of muscle mass at this time.
That's what I've actually kind of figured out as well. It's just focusing on strength as opposed to actual size. Once you've the strength and that you lay down those foundations, whether it comes with size or not, once you've built that strength, when the time is right, you will put on a bit of muscle mass a bit easier because you've built the foundations to do that. Like, so there's ways of dealing with it. I know I don't deal with that side of it, but I'd be speaking to people kind of in a private sense, outside of teamwork, where you have to kind of have that bit of knowledge as well. So it's important that you understand these things, like, and you also get the athletes that probably carrying a bit too much body fat and they know it, but then it's a time they want to focus on it when they're injured, and depending on who that person is and how much they have in terms of body fat, then maybe you can, but also you can't go into a huge deficit because you need to look after their recovery and the environment that's creating. So it's just trying to find the balance based on who's in front of you. Like,
Irish people don't like balance stuff for some reason. It's all or nothing, like, which is
only human nature likes it anyway. So it's with all of us, we're just trying to find a bit more anyway. Like, I mean, I think it's a classic cliche that I probably throw out a bit too much. Like, people are sick of hearing me saying balance or consistency and stuff, but like, yourself, you can't be a world beater one day and forget about it the next. Like, you might as well have had 2 half decent days instead of the extremes. Go for the average of the 2 and see where you go. Like,
and that sounds like that's something that, like, you don't regret anything in terms of your professional career and how diligent you were with the rehab, but at some level, and I've heard you speak before, that you would have just said, here, if you could go back and talk to them, relax, go out with the lads, go have a coffee, go connect with people. Like, that social element is as important and de-stressing as is your nutrition and as is your rehab and as is your training.
Yeah, like, I didn't go through recurring injuries, to be fair, so like, this will impact some of what I'm going to say. You see some players that getting a niggle and then they get a different niggle and a different niggle, and they're so uptight about it, and you wonder what it's doing for them. I don't know the psychology behind that, or particularly how that brain works, but like, yourself going through the rehab process that you just get so uptight about some things that you don't really need to get uptight about. But I've said that loads of times. If I go back, like, the reason I can manage my injury and the frustrations around it is because I didn't leave a stone unturned. I prefer to have done it that way than to be a social animal that didn't really do enough. So for me, the lack of balance was skewed in the right direction for me to have peace of mind now. But like, at the same time, I could have pulled back 10% and gone for a lunch and made a good decision there based on what I thought I knew, and be more social and get out of my own head, like, and I think some of that was that I was just trying to tick every box, and it wasn't so anyone else could be told that they were wrong or right or whatever way it was. It was just, this is what I was supposed to do. So I was doing it as much as I could. Like, this phrase of how you do anything is how you do everything. That was something that I like to think in my head. And I was talking to my brother about this, and it's like, you can't even give yourself a break then, because you need to be switched on all the time, or you need to do the right things at home all the time. It's not the extreme of that saying, but like, you don't want to, if you don't do it well enough, I think you live with regret. If you overdo it, and if I have regrets on the social side of it, I can live with that. Like, there's times to catch up, but there was an end point to that period where I was a complete recluse, like, so maybe I could have just relaxed a small bit more.
So that would have been a major learning from your professional career, I'm sure, and it did definitely stand you in good stead going into self-employment, I would say. Are you able to switch off now, or do you still kind of sometimes be like, I need to do everything as best I can? Or are you told, here, look, finish that up and then take the night off?
Yeah, it depends on who you're asking, but no, I don't really have an off switch, and it's shocking. Like I can't. When I was a player, you see, I had a specialized position as a kicker, like in an out half, and and then as a professional, I think you can't really switch off. Some fellas are very good at it, some fellas are too good at it, and there's, you have to be somewhere along that spectrum too. But like, my whole life was a training day in terms of when I was getting my next meal and when I was doing my extras, and I didn't, as an athlete, switch off either. If I was in a social situation, I was still thinking about what I was doing the next morning, like, so no, I was able to enjoy myself. I put it out there as if I'm absolutely zero crack, like I'm a small bit, not the best crack in the room, but I do have my moments. But I think I'm a small bit like that. I think self-employment runs parallel to that, like I see a lot of people and they're afraid of work as well, and it pisses me off in a sense. Like, they think they want to be self-employed, or they think they want to climb the ladder in a certain job, and you're kind of going, come off it. Like, you're not willing to go into work 5 days a week and leave when the job is done. But at the same time, I envy some fellas who have that, and they know how to leave work, and they know how to not care about it either. Like, so I think something that's happened to me in the last small while is that, you can't control some things when you're stuck in something else. And that, even it's only in the last couple of months that I've decided, like, my laptop, I know there's something on my laptop and I want to get it done, but I'm somewhere else, so like, if I'm in Cork and I know there's a nutritional program that I'm trying to do on my laptop, I physically can't do it. So stop thinking about it. So like, that's why I write down a lot of things and to-do lists and stuff like that, just so I don't forget about it, and my head gets a little bit more settled. But at the same time, there's another stage to that where I'm kind of going, you can't do it right now, like, so shut up, like, and just stop bothering yourself, and you can get back to it when you're back to it. So it's more kind of a trying to close off when you're doing one thing, being that thing, and when you're doing another thing, being that thing. And I think I actually came a small bit in a realization from listening to Jonny Wilkinson podcast on the High Performance podcast. And like, he kind of just spoke about living, it's cliched about living in the moment, but like, doing what you're doing 100%, then doing the other thing 100%. So like, if you're being social, go and be social and do it properly. Or if you're working, work properly. Now, I don't mean that as if I don't look at my phone when I'm supposed to be doing something, like, but I think there was a small bit of a switch that I flicked in the last couple of months that just, I might not be very good at it, but I'm getting better at just deciding, like, you can't do that right now, so stop and do something else, and do that properly, and don't be looking at someone with a blank expression because you're thinking about being somewhere else, like,
That podcast is my favorite podcast of all time, and it has a big parallel with another piece of literature that I've heard you talk about before, which is Cal Newport's Deep Work, which I love as well, and about setting boundaries around your work as well, and having a place to work and being in the work when you're doing it, no distraction. And then when you're away from the work, you have the opportunity to relax from it, which I don't do well myself. Like, I don't, like, and that's a life of being self-employed, as we talked about. There'll always be work, though. There will always be work. It's never over. The to-do lists are great and all for crossing things off, but like, you could easily add another few things to them every day. Like, so you need to just relax at times and take some time away from it to relax, so that you can be more efficient when you come back to the work.
And I think that's like the empathy for yourself as well. Like, I mean, I was working I think it was after a wedding, we came back, and I was like, I had a load of things to do, and I got up early, and I surprised myself in how efficient I was that morning. I got loads of things done that I didn't think I was going to do. So I moved on to the next thing after lunch, and in my head, I have a kind of a time period where something should be done. Like, so if I'm doing a nutritional program, it's X amount of time, and if I'm doing an article, it should be X amount of time. So like, I have those things in my head, but in the afternoon, I wasn't getting through it. Like, it just wasn't happening, and like, that would just stress me out more and more. Like, and I want to finish it, then I want to get it done, because next thing I can't move on to the next part, or I can't make the dinner on time to get out to training and all that kind of crack. But like, I actually just kind of slowed down and said, you've got a lot of work done this morning. There's only so much of this actual efficiency that you can have. Tip away, like, and what you get done, you get done. And it actually just settled me a small bit. I think I did finish it in the end, but like, as in at the time that I thought, but like, it was just the stress. I'm very bad for, I think about losing something, where is it? And Chloe would be going, you find it was there the last time. I was like, no, I need to find it right now. And if something's in my head, it has to happen right now. And like, the stress doesn't do you any good. Like, the password is sitting on the locker anyway. So when you're out inside in town and you can't find it because you're not at home, what's the point in thinking about it more? But look, I think there's certain traits that are our biggest strength and our biggest weakness. So
absolutely.
Like, I think I say that about a lot of people, like, their strengths are the ones that go against them, not their weaknesses so much, because that is their weakness when they take it too far. So like, my work ethic from being a professional player is probably my biggest weakness as a person at home, like, you know, because I just won't switch off, or give me 2 seconds there, I just need to switch on the laptop or something because it's not going away out of my head. Stop, like, you know, so that is a weakness as much as it's a strength.
But you can't wish that you were any other way, I suppose,
No.
because like then you wouldn't be the way that you are in the facets of your life that it improves, like, and it makes you better. It sounds like you were more so of a warrior than a warrior in terms of your preparation for games, and like you had to have it all ticked off. And that is kind of, I think, of most out halves, that's kind of a common characteristic of them. Like, do you know, other than maybe a few very high profile ones that don't worry about the game at all until it's time to play the game. But
that's the way
we do envy them as well. Like,
yeah, but that's perception as well, because I think, like, I'm definitely a warrior, and I wouldn't really hide that, because that's what made me more and more of a hermit and a recluse when I was injured and rehabbing. Like, I couldn't have lived with myself if I did it the other way. So like I did it this way. But you know, like, and I worry about a lot of stupid things, and other people are very much able to switch off and put it to the back of their mind, and that's just the way you do things. But you have to be able to, once you're aware of that, I think you can kind of deal with it a little bit better. But at the same time, like, preparing for games and things, I would have liked to have my work done and go into the game. I was still nervous, but like, no one would, you know, you go through a string of games and people are going, how are you managing this? Like, you're only kind of just into the team and you look like you're enjoying yourself and you look like you look relaxed. And I was nowhere near relaxed. But that's a perception that you have to try and get out there for your own sake, but also for the people around you looking at you. If you're a bag of nerves trying to catch a ball, people are going to lose confidence or respect in what you're doing. So like, you have to put other people at ease as much as you have to put yourself at ease as well. Like,
yeah, but prep puts you at ease, like, because you know what's coming. Like the same thing that they could be saying to you, like, Johnny, why didn't you come for a coffee with us at the weekend? Like, and then at the weekend you don't spot that their winger's coming up and there's loads of space in behind her. Like, Johnny, why didn't you spot that? And it's like, because I didn't do my video when I went for a coffee with you lads. So like, it's just like, at some level and at some stage, people just need to, I know it's cliche, but they have to accept you the way you are. You can still work on yourself and work on the things that aren't helpful for you, but at the same time, just people are people, you know, that's the way they are. That's what works for them. So like, you just have to give them their space, I suppose, and you have to be good as a person at setting boundaries and saying, like, no, this is just the way that I do it. So
I think that's like when you're dealing with people, you know, in a squad. I know with Munster, we did that kind of personality profiling and stuff like that as well. Like, whatever you think about the certain ways of doing it, I think it just opened, there was learning in doing it regardless of what that structure was. So like, this person deals with things through conflict, and this person thinks about it really logically, and this person really hates conflict. So like I like confrontation a lot more than my brother likes it, and you know, we're triplets, so you know, we're not the exact same people. So it's like, and my sister would probably be in the middle. So she likes a little bit more conflict, but not as much as me. So like, I'm not exactly going around arguing with people, but if I believe in something, I'm going to keep going, you know. So like, it's how you deal with different people, and like small things. Like, we played PlayStation when we were younger, and like, I probably beat Cormac once or twice, and then if he got his win, he'd be like, happy out, leave it, like he's undefeated. And I'd be like, play me again, and he's like, no. And I'd be like, play me again, more confrontation, more competition, and he's like, no, I don't want to. And I couldn't understand why he didn't want to compete again, or why he didn't want to beat me twice. He was happy with beating me once, or whatever it was. Like, maybe I wasn't even beating him at all, but like, you know, I couldn't understand his different approach. And that was something that actually allowed me to understand other people's approaches. But when you deal with other people and you understand that then as well, that you know, he's after biting the head off me here. If I react, we're both arguing, whereas I know that that's his way of dealing with things. So if I give him 5 or 10 minutes here, we might come back and have a better conversation. So like, you know, there's restraint in that and a bit of control in that. And you're not always, like, I meant to say a while ago, I'm not a perfect person, like, by any means, and I've got a lot of flaws, but so I don't want it to come across that I've got my shit together and I know everything. But like, you know, I think I've got a bit of a framework in my mind where people, without awareness, you know, you can't action things. The next part of education is making people aware, whether they action it or not, at least they're aware. And then you get action and awareness together. So like, you know, when people are unaware, that's where you get loads of conflict and they don't know how to deal with people. Then when you're a bit aware of how to deal with it, you don't deal with every situation well. Like, I'll still argue with Chloe because I'm completely wrong about something, but I just get stuck into it and I can't pull back. I was aware then that I got a bit riled up, and I can deal with my actions afterwards. Whereas if I wasn't aware of that, I wouldn't back down. You know what I mean? Whereas obviously the best place to be is being aware of that and taking that action. but like it doesn't always happen. So like I think that's it. I deal with that like in terms of nutrition as well. People will say like, I'm going out at the weekend, I'm having a couple of pints. I know it's not the best thing in the world, but look, socially I need a little bit this weekend. And I kind of going, well, at least you're aware and you're not coming into me on Monday morning going, I'm 2 kilos heavier, what is going on? Like, you know, we can kind of go, well, you said this before the weekend, you're aware that the pints are going to make your weight go up, you're aware that you have a bit of pizza after you're out. It doesn't mean that you've ruined the whole thing. So let's settle down a small bit, less frustration. Whereas when you don't know those things, frustration goes high and you can't really deal with it. But I think that's applicable to a couple of different areas, like whether you're dealing with a person or you're dealing with nutrition or you're dealing with coaching. Like 3v2 in rugby, if they don't see it and you're telling them to pass the ball, they're kind of going, what do you mean? Like, there's a space in front of me. And you're going, no, there's a bigger space on the edge, like you should have thrown it. And they're like kind of banging their head off the wall going, what's he on about? If they're aware that there's a 3v2 but they held onto the ball, at least they'll go, I saw it, I just didn't give it, and we're both on the same page. Obviously I'd like them to see it and pass the ball, but like that doesn't always happen, you know. So I think that's the thing about creating awareness and education so that people can action it, and it's their decision whether they do or not then afterwards.
Loads there. I love it all as well. Like, and the thing about conflict as well, like people always think about conflict as a bad thing, but conflict is your approach to everything, as will be mine. And it's the conflict is getting things done and out of the way. So if there is an issue, I'm going to address the issue head on and then it will be over. Whereas other people kind of are more comfortable with leaving that issue sit for a while. Whereas self-employed people like myself and yourself just can't leave anything sit. It has to be done. It has to be out of the way, and then I can relax when it's out of the way, but I can't relax otherwise. But like have now knowing and being aware and understanding different personality types, has that helped you to understand different players' point of view in different situations? Whereas before, when you were playing, you would have been like, why'd you give it? Do you know what I mean? Like, yeah.
I think it's like, you know, the person without confrontation, you're going up to them and going, did you see it? What are you seeing? This is what I saw. You know, what's your solution here? And maybe just allowing them to kind of speak back to you a small bit more. But then if they're a little bit too yellow and too relaxed, you kind of have to go, come here, that was on. You have to give the ball, and they go, what? And they kind of, you get their attention, you know? So like at the same time, the person who you know is going to come back at you, you might have to take that soft approach with them as well, or else it's an argument. So like, you know, but also they might respond well to that approach because they see what you're seeing and they take it more seriously, because otherwise they're going to just kind of control you in the kind of conflict area. Like they just kind of overpower you and they're right even though they're wrong, you know. But at the same time, I can be wrong with these things. So like you said earlier about empathy and stuff like that, if I'm going as a coach, this is what's on the video at slow speed, I'm not a fool. Like, you know, that's not what happens on the pitch. So like I'd often kind of say, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is what I'm seeing and I think it's on. Another they'll go, no, not at the speed of the game, and I go, okay, fair enough. But at times you have to go, absolutely not. Like players are, you know, they're going to play mossy as well at times, like depending on who it is. So like you have to go, no, absolutely not. I think you've time there to give it. All right, okay, fair enough. You know, so it's like you said,
that's not the response usually.
Yeah,
all right, fair enough.
Yeah, fair enough. I see.
Coaching would be very, very easy if that was the answer. But that's what I was going to ask you, was because like you're so close in age and you have played with a number of the players that you're now coaching. Is that ever a struggle with you, in that sometimes they might see you as more of a peer than a coach? But I suppose it's a little bit easier as well because you're doing that collaborative approach where we're working on it together. So that probably works for you.
Yeah, I think you use it in one sense, but it definitely comes against you in others. Like, so, I mean, if you're trying to get buy-in from people, it helps that you've been fresher out of the game, or it helps that you're still seeing it from their eyes. Like, and I think, you know, our coach and Con, Brian Hickey, would have said to me at some stage, you know, I like how you're still seeing it from the players' eyes, and I'm up in the stand kind of job, you know. So whether I'm moving too far back into that stand or not, I'm not sure. But like, I think like that now, you're trying to understand where they're coming from a little bit more, and you're conscious that if you're the person dealing with the absolutes, like you said earlier, that no, that's the decision, that you lose their respect in one sense, but you'll also lose their buy-in, like, you know. So it's not something I did consciously, but it's just something that kind of came to me when I was a young coach, like. But at the same time, then you are on their level age-wise and stuff like that. Now I'm pushing on a small bit with our fellas, but you know, like the hard side of that is when you do have to be a bit more authoritative and you have to select a team and you don't want to leave everyone down or anyone down. So like it's there are times where, you know, you prefer to be dealing with fellas who are 20, 30 years younger than you, and you don't really care what they think, but I do care what they think, you know. So it's that's where it becomes a little bit tougher. Like, I don't know, maybe that's my approach and I'll always care what they think, but like sometimes it is a little bit difficult. Like stepping more into that kind of main role, and kind of I hate that side of the game. I hate having I like dealing with people, like, definitely, and I like explaining where I'm coming from and seeing their view on it as well. So, like, my biggest thing with them at the moment is that I'll be honest with you when I'm trying to, if I'm selecting you or not selecting, I'll still be honest with you. And otherwise, I think I'll kind of get caught up in my own lies, and they're going to lose my respect anyway. So I'm going to lose their respect. So I'd like to try and keep it as open and honest as I can, so that we're still on that level. But, like, the minute you start kind of promoting them, you lose the relationship. So I think that's a really tough one for me at the moment. I don't know, do you ever get used to it? Because I know older coaches will tell you it's the worst part of the job, like, and I believe it as well. So that's where it's hard when you are more their age, or some of them are older than you, and you've built up a relationship with them as people and friends and players before you've dealt with them as a coach. So
but you have to do that as well, though. You have to do that as well, like. If you're going to connect with them, like, you've got to have a relationship with them, and especially what you said. Go on.
The relationship comes with truth as well, though. Like, if you say, like, I just don't think you're playing that well in this, I fucking am, like, and who's better than me and what are they doing? And you kind of go, this is the way I see it. And at the end of it, then you might have to just go, look, that's what I've seen this week, and that's my decision. And it doesn't mean that you're out of the game next week, like, so I think it's a really hard part of the job, though. But it
has to be honest as well, though. Like, just because it's honest doesn't mean it's harsh. Like, you can still put a nice tone on it and say, and the other thing is, like, if you lie to them once, they'll spot it and they'll know you're lying to them, and they won't trust you again. And you have to have trust and open lines of communication. And it sounds like
you do go too far, but sometimes you just have to be like, that's the way it is, like, and there'll be a response. But at the same time, you're dealing with their reaction in that conversation. They'll come back to you tomorrow and go, yeah, look, all right, I need to work on this. Or they might come back to you and go, you're still wrong. So, like, then maybe I need to look at my actions and rethink it as well. So, like, conversations in the one spot are the conversation that you're having, but both parties go away and reflect on it and come back. Like, you'll have an argument with someone, or you'll have a discussion with someone, and, like, even if it's myself and Chloe, we'll have an argument, we'll both go away, and you might come back and go, look, that was my fault. Maybe both of us don't do it at all, actually, but, at some stage you will kind of go, that was me. Or you might come back and go, no, it still was you, like, so I think there's you have to allow the kind of process to happen where people can reflect on what they've said as well. So, like, if a player comes gunning at you, you don't need to go back at them to be authoritative. Maybe sometimes you do, because they're out of line, or they're talking shit, or they're wrong, like, factually.
Depends on the person.
Yeah, sometimes you need to allow them to get worked up, because they will reflect on it at some stage and come back to you maybe with different views as well.
I see a lot in younger generations now, not to broadcast it, and it's very generalized, but I am generalizing. I see that when you're coaching them now, you have to meet them on a level more so than the authoritative approach that we were used to when we were younger, and we were told what to do, and that's the way it is, and you have to do it, and that's it. And yourself, like, if a coach said to you, like, I don't think you're good enough, back in the day, like, myself or yourself would say, well, like, I'm gonna do it now. Whereas now, I don't know, like, if it's because people are more socially aware of how people perceive them, but with younger lads, sometimes if you're that harsh with them and you're that black and white with them, you could deter them from ever trying again. So you have to meet them on a level, be honest about it, but you have to be open too. So they're like, you have to have a growth kind of mindset and say, like, look, you're not playing great at the moment, but that doesn't mean you're a bad player. If you work on these few different things, I'll be happy with you, and hopefully that'll solve the problem that we're having. Like,
yeah, but, like, I think, like you said, they were deterred from sport. Like, I hope it's not happening on my watch, but, like, people did go away from sport, and they find a different sport because they can't deal with that person. I'd hate for someone to get away from the game because of me. Like, and sometimes they might think it's you at the time, but it's just competition. There's other people in spots. Maybe it's just a personality clash or something. But like, I think the authoritative. You've got Eddie Jones's book behind you. I haven't read it, and I just saw an article that's behind the paywall. Yeah, like the article behind the paywall that I was looking at a while ago, I didn't really see much of it, but it was just along the lines of, I think it was John Mitchell, the coach, that kind of stepped away from him because apparently he is so authoritative that it's old fashioned. And, like, I don't have all the facts and figures because I didn't read the whole thing, but I think we can all kind of understand the Eddie Jones approach, like, his way or someone else, or go somewhere else, So, like, I think just with the way society is going, like, I mean, you might call these people a certain generation with, snowflake generations and generation X and all these kind of things.
I think it's communication, like, more so than that kind of thing.
Isn't it? That we're aware that you can have an impact on someone's mental health, or you can have an impact on their enjoyment of sport, or you can, they just go away and find something else to do because they don't need to listen to your shit, like, So I think you have to be very much aware that you will impact someone's day depending on how you've spoken to them. So you can still get your point across without being a complete goat about it. Like,
yeah, 100%. But that's the thing as well, like that I would have said you'd prefer the assistant coaching role than the head coaching role because it allows you more freedom. And I think that, I know it's part of the job, but in coaching and selection, like they're two completely different things. And I know myself, I definitely prefer the coaching side of things. I definitely prefer having freedom to do that.
Yeah, Earlsy's book was fascinating in some angles, that like he spoke about Axel during the time when he got quite stressed and wasn't enjoying his coaching because he actually wasn't coaching. He was dealing with contracts and he was dealing with hiring and firing and dropping and all the rest of it. So like, I think there is a part of that as an assistant coach, you can come in a little bit less prepared because someone else is making the session. Well, what am I doing? Oh yeah, I'll do that drill and I'll have 20 minutes and then I can kind of sit at the back for another small while. I never really sat at the back anyway because there's always another side to a game in rugby. Like there's two lines, so you're either dealing with defence or attack. Like so there's always something to do. So like I tried to get involved as much as I can. I never would sit at the back of a session anyway, but like you definitely don't have to have the dropping and selecting, and you don't have to have a lot of those kind of the clubs and the committees and all the things that are going on above the level of the team. Like there's a lot more going on. So like it's a hard one. And look, I'm a younger coach, I suppose. At 30, I'm still younger as a coach. So you have to deal with all those kind of things. Whether I'll grow more and more into that, I'm not sure. But like you know, even in matches these days, in AL matches, like the second half becomes a conversation of subs and when you're going to make them. You actually miss a lot of the second half with things that are going on, and someone goes down, you're looking around you to find your players and who's the best option with the combinations that's happening. Like, you know, so I actually find the second halves are harder to kind of get a handle on, and that's why I won't ever go at the end of a game and say this is exactly what happened and why we were good or why we were bad, because I have to actually look back at it and review it. Yeah. You know?
But the reason that's hard, I think, in the AL anyway and in Ireland is because you only have 5 subs. And it's ridiculous and it needs to change. And if we had 7 or 8 subs, like it'd be so much easier and it'd be so much safer as well for the players, because the theory is that we have less subs so that the players out there aren't as fatigued, so we can nobody gets injured. But if they get more fatigued, they're more susceptible to injury. So, but never mind that anyway. I was going to say, like, it sounds like the Stuart Lancaster style role, like of the head coach says what he wants us to work on and then devise the session plan. I'll go and I'll coach the session plan and keep me removed from the selection. Like I said, I think that role sounds ideal. And it's similar to kind of soccer and a manager and then a coach. Like,
yeah, unfortunately, I'm probably still like selection is on me, you know, so like it's with the first team anyway, I think the selection is on me. No, I don't make that all on my own, but like it is my say, so I have to front up to those conversations. So like, it's definitely a tough part, but yeah, I still have Brian operating over me in a sense, like so it's not, I'm not out there on my own, like, and I'm still learning quite a bit from him. So yeah, but like you said, it's easier to coach and just deal with the facets of the game. Like it's a different role altogether. It's the same as being, I think I kind of liken it to, you know, you're a nutritionist in a private practice, and then you want to do your own thing, and then you only have so many hours in the day, so maybe you employ some people, but you end up being a business person, not a nutritionist. And it's like, which one do you want to be? And some people are happy being the nutritionist all their lives, and other people are sick of dealing with people. They want to sit on top of something. And I think that's kind of similar to what it is. Like once you're dealing with the premises and dealing with who comes into it, you're actually not coaching anymore. So like, it's trying to find that balance of which one you prefer.
That's what we say as well, like as strength and conditioning coaches, is you go up the hierarchy and then eventually somebody puts you in a head of performance role. He's really good at coaching, let's make him head of performance. And then you go to that role and you're not doing any coaching, you're just dealing with people.
Exactly,
so it's a tough one. But then to touch on Con now before we finish, like it's been a tough start to the season, but I'll emphasize, because I think people are getting carried away, it's the start of the season. There's only been 3 matches, like, and you've had tough fixtures, and then the papers are saying, oh, Connor gone to the dogs or whatever, and it must be really really struggling down there and the atmosphere must be really poor. But like at the same time, like you have Trinity this weekend, I'd say it must be tough being in a situation where you're used to winning and then you lose, but like it's only a couple of matches, like it's still wide open. Would that be the same opinion you would have?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, anyone who think that Connor gone to the dogs would be fairly off the mark. But at the same time, we were talking about this recently, that like black and white, you're not at the top of the table, so like deal with it, you know. And I think if everyone won all the time, coaching would be easy and everyone would be doing it. But like you're going to have to get through a phase where you have to. That's what coaching is. It's the same as like people who are only willing to deal with the first 15 or the first 20, 21 because they're easier to coach. Like when people need more development, that's where coaching starts you know, it's not like coaching doesn't stop at the first 21, like, you know. So I think it's the same thing, that you can't only coach when you're winning, because that's the nice side of it. Like, real coaching is the people that, it's the Sam Allardyce or someone that comes in to rescue the team. They're the coaches, like, you know, they're the managers. So I think you'd be hard on yourself there, kind of going, fucking, and taking a bit more of a role here, and all of a sudden we're losing. And you can get caught up in that, in the blame game. But like, at the end of the day, there's things that happen, there's injuries, there's, yeah, maybe a tough start, but we'd like to think we're a tough start as well, you know. So like, I wouldn't kind of like, a tough start for us 3 years ago is what made us go on a 14 out of 14 run, like, you know, because we got past the tough start. So that's an opportunity as much as it is a kind of a tough period of starting the season. So like, yeah, with any of these things, it's just stick to your processes, stick to what you believe in, and the win will happen. But like, I'm not saying it's definitely going to happen this week, but you know,
yeah, but you can never say that.
Yeah, but if you start becoming more and more under pressure and more enclosed, then you just you're not playing the game the same way, and you're starting to freak out over pressure. So I think, like you said, it's 3 games in an 18-game season, like, and it's kind of unprecedented, and coming back from a pandemic and where people are at, whether they're taking holidays now that they wouldn't have taken before because life is more important, and all of these kind of things. You know, there's different combinations how we're going to coach, and like, other teams are going to beat other teams as well. You know, I had this thing in my head that like, anytime we won the league or come close to winning it, we've lost 3 games. I think the 2 times I was more involved, you know, the year before I got involved in the seniors, they lost 3 games, but they won everything that season. And the year we won the league, we only lost 3 times that season. And the year we were going 14 in a row, obviously it was 14 games, or there was 4 games left with 2 playoff games. I don't think we were going to lose more than 3, whether that was winning a final or not, I'm not sure. So that kind of thing was stuck in my head, and you get these structures like, oh, you can't lose more than 3. We're after losing 3, like, so is 3 going to be the magic number post pandemic? I wouldn't really think so, but it's also in your control whether other teams lose 3 or not, because you can have a dent off 1 or 2 of those games too. So I think there's loads to go, but like, you know, you can't win everything every year, unfortunately, and that's just a real reality that you have to work under as well, you know.
So then like, obviously from a coaching point of view it's stressful, but from a playing point of view it's stressful too. Have you been working to kind of lift the mood amongst the lads that do get stressed? Because not all of them will get stressed because they're losing, do you know?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm working to lift the mood, but I'm definitely working on being conscious of not dampening the mood so much, because it's very easy to come in and go, what are we up to? Look at what you've done, and look at what you've done, and you know, we're so poor. Like, it's very easy to do that, but like, you have to come in and take the learnings from what you need to take, and also not batter people's confidence, like, because that's no good to anyone, and me as well. So like, I think it does tighten you up in a sense with like some bits of, maybe a selection becomes an older lad, or maybe, you know, whatever happens, like, these things have to go through your mind, because you're not after winning the last 3 games, but like, you can't just change what you've done, what you believe will win the first 3 games. You have to tweak things, obviously, but you can't just go on. Like, if that's the case, you just play a completely different game plan to see if that one works, and then you use another 3 games on that. So like, it's I don't think you can change a whole lot, not 3 games anyway.
To go pure cliche, next game and trust the process are the 2 things.
Yeah, well, I always think that you kind of start looking down the line that this one might be one that we can take, or another one might be one we can take, but like, there's 4 or 5 points available for every game, you know. So you can't take your eyes off the next 4 points, like.
100%. Right. Before we finish firing through the quickfire questions, first one is proudest achievement to date.
None of these are going to be quick because I don't do them that way. I think like, it's funny because you can be proud of certain things, but I'm obviously proud of getting selected for that Leinster game in the Aviva. I had a decent run out. I don't think I played as well as what people would perceive, but like, it's more what I stood for. I was actually selected tier 1 game in competition. You know, I was trusted, but then that's sport, like, isn't it? Life is bigger, and I wouldn't say, and like, that was bigger than sport for me. Like, my parents were in the stand, my brother was there, people were there, my friends, and you know, just stood for a lot in the communication, what people were kind of saying to me, and the pride that other people had in me, blah blah blah. But I think there's also, like, you know, like you said, I got married recently. I don't think you're proud of being married because it's like an achievement, but like, I think
you had to mention it though.
Yeah, but no, but the weekend that we had, I just, like, Chloe was kind of saying to me, like, it's supposed to be the best day of your life and all that. I was like, I had the best weekend ever. The people that were with us, family and friends, I just, you know, it's not proud, but I actually just,
you value it, I suppose.
I valued it quite highly. Like, it made me very content. So I think it's different to pride, but it's kind of like parallel, you know.
Yeah, I get you. Favorite athlete of all time?
Athlete's a funny one, because I think about people who are out and out S&C athletes. Like, you think about LeBron James and Ronaldo, but then you think about who's achieved things, and you're kind of going, you know, Katie Taylor, like, you know, what an athlete. So
Hasn't been mentioned before, actually, in 48 episodes. Like, hasn't been mentioned yet.
Yeah, I just think you can't. I don't like to compare athletes because it's unfair. It's a different sport. How do you compare people at the top of their game? There's so many great athletes, but you can't say who the best one ever
But
is.
it's not best, I suppose. It's like your favorite or somebody that's been impactful in your life, I suppose.
I think I just kind of value different sides of that athlete. Like I think LeBron James or Ronaldo as an out and out athletic specimen, you put him up there, but other people are just achieving so much that you'd kind of appreciate that, like Katie Taylor does too, like, you know. So someone along those couple.
Next one's favorite rugby player of all time. Can be somebody you played with or somebody you played against or somebody not from our era at all.
Oh, I think someone that influenced me in my way of thinking and the way I've tried to play the game was Jonny Wilkinson. And it's supposed to be Raj because I grew up in Munster and I loved Raj and I loved Dan Carter, but it was Jonny Wilkinson when I looked at it. Yeah, but he was left-legged. He liked to tackle at underage. I did at senior level. I didn't really, but he was the one that I kind of thought, you know, he was top of the game.
He's the most commonly named rugby player by a mile, I would say. Yeah. Next one is artists you've been listening to a lot recently.
I don't. I actually don't listen to music. I listen to what's on, and I don't really. Hosier would take up my Spotify every now and then, or Dermot Kennedy then for a while. But I actually don't. Like, I just listen to what's on, pour that way.
You're the second person in a row that said that, and it's the last time was the first person that had said that, which is very strange. Like, nobody's listening to music these days.
Yeah.
Who's playing you in the movie?
I don't watch movies. I watch what Chloe wants to watch. So again,
what actor is playing you in the movie? So pick one.
No idea. I can't. I could think about this for. I think I was asked Chloe's hen. I was kind of asked a couple of questions like this, like who would Chloe think she'd want to be and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, I actually can't think of anyone. So I was like, no, I'm not answering it. So I'm actually. I tell you enough that I have very little interest.
Johnny's playing himself in the movie. He's so much time for all this work because he never watches movies or listens to music.
Yeah,
that's why he's so efficient. Right, what meal are you loving at the moment?
It's not so much a meal, but like I can't stop drinking chocolate milk. I love putting roasted or toasted kind of nut combination into my porridge, but I'm loving a small bit of Cadbury's chocolate at the moment as well, which is becoming a bad habit. So some of those, but like, yeah, favorite.
You're training away though, so like as long as it's post training, like who would mind?
Yeah, I'm doing a bit.
What books are you reading at the moment?
I just finished Earlsey's one, which is funny because I don't really read that style of book anymore. But I had to read it. I ordered Ray Goggins' one as well, so that's kind of like gone away from what I was doing the last while. But before that, I wasn't really reading a whole lot. Like between Deep Work and Ryan Holiday, The Obstacle Is the Way. Those kind of self-development books, for want of a better term, were what I was kind of reading. But since I started the masters, I actually wasn't really reading commercial books like that, you know.
What's the biggest thing you've learned the last 12 months?
The biggest thing I've learned, but I'm not still very good at actioning it, is I think the pandemic taught me that people are way more important than what you're doing. Like seeing your family and your friends, and, you know, don't just say I can't go to that social event because I still have a load of work on, or, you know, just make a bit more of an effort to be at things, and when you're there, take a lot of interest in people. So I think that was something that kind of hit home with me in the pandemic. And Chloe kind of said, like, you'd never have taken the pace off if that didn't happen. So it's actually, the pandemic's one of the better things that has happened to me in a funny, twisted way. But I've gone straight back into it, and I found it very hard again to switch off. So like, I think I have definitely learned that, you know, like I said earlier, compartmentalize things a little bit better, and just be more available to people, I think.
Be in the moment. What would you tell your 18-year-old self?
You're not doing too badly, or you won't do too badly, and, you know, I think keep working hard, I think is a main feature of, I think, the foundations of what you do. If you're not willing to work, I think you're not going to really achieve what you want to achieve. But at the same time, you know, you can reflect on what you've done and all that, and you can kind of be very critical of yourself. But I think whatever way the roads twist and wind, I'm happy enough where I am at the moment, and I don't think you change things, you know. So I'd just say keep going and have an open mind, and don't be so hard on yourself.
And you don't need sweet potato twice a day.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right, Johnny. Feature. Thanks a million. That was great. Thanks for your time. Really, really enjoyed it. Thanks for coming on.
No, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.